Facebook.
All right. All right. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in on Read with Tertib, episode 5, with me, Sophia from Tertib Publishing. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with us. Tonight, we have a special book. I can say it's our new book by Sheikh Mikael Smith, With the Heart in Mind. We received so we receive tremendous support from all of you about this book, and we received good review on it too. So we thought on why not we invite one of the reader to give the review on it. So inshallah, without further delay, I would welcome Sister Najiba Nasruddin to the screen. Inshallah. Assalamualaikum Najiba.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
How are you today? How are you feeling?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good too.
Okay.
About the book, I mean, how is it so far?
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I just received the book earlier on this week, a couple of days ago, and because I found out that the the selling of this book is only sold with Tertib, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I heard that Tertib was going to sell this book, I know for a fact that no other publisher or no other shop has this book in Malaysia just yet. So I immediately wanted to book my hands on it, and yeah, that was how I, came across this book. I know for a fact that Sheikh Mikael Ahmed Smith has given a talk before with Al Maghrib, but unfortunately, I didn't attend the talk. But I know that this book is really sought after, so I wanted to make sure that I managed to get a copy. And did you ask how it's been so far, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's an eye opener, definitely. I would say that. I don't know how else to describe the book, but it's opened so many insights for me, particularly around areas that I have never really explored before, and especially in the perspective of Islam. So um, yeah, to be specific, the area of psychology and um, the art of thinking, basically.
All
So
right.
it's been amazing. It's been amazing.
I can't wait to hear from you.
Uh-huh.
I think we all do. So, inshallah, I'll give the floor to you, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sophia. Okay, so to start, I'm going to begin with saying that the book is really detailed and elaborate. It's about, like I said, it's about the art of thinking and how we can apply. As you can see on the title, it says "with the heart in mind." So if you think about the title, it's to encourage us to think about issues, or to think about mm, to think about issues with not just with our mind, but also with the skill of uh, emotional intelligence, with applying our feelings and our emotion to our thoughts. So I'm going to start with giving a brief info on the introduction book, because the book is about this thick. Okay. And the book is divided into four chapters. Sorry, five. Four chapters, and then there's an introduction in the beginning. So the introduction is quite long, because in order for the author to establish the explanation of akal and emotional intelligence and moral intelligence, he needed to set like a introduction, establish background information on that. Okay. Before I begin with telling you a bit more about the introduction, I'm going to tell you a bit about the author himself. So his name is Sheikh Mikail Ahmed Smith. The author can be seen at the back of the book. He is a revert. He reverted when he was 18 years old, and his name before he reverted was Michael V. Smith. So he reverted when he was 18 after reading the Quran and the autobiography of Malcolm X. So we all know who Malcolm X is, right? He's a famous famous person in America. Okay, so soon after he reverted, he enrolled at Darul Ulum Al Madaniya in Buffalo, New York, where he completed his memorization of the Quran. He continued his Islamic studies in Jamia Abu Nur in Damascus, Syria. So he pursued his studies in Syria. In 2012, he completed his Hadith studies of the Sahih Sitta, that is six most authentic collections of the prophetic traditions and Quranic tafsir. And then he earned his alimiyah from Darul Ulum, Canada. And then now he is currently teaching Islamic law, theology, and principles of hadith full-time at Kalam Seminary in Dallas, Texas. Okay, so so that's a bit about the author. I'm going to move on with telling you a bit about the intro. Okay. The intro is quite important to me, like I said, because it sets the background information of what's going to be discussed throughout the book. So I've highlighted a few pages in the book where I felt is worth emphasizing in this book review tonight. And I'm going to begin with the need for emotional intelligence, because this book it persuades us to think, not just using our IQ, which is the what we're all familiar with when we talk about thinking, right? But it also persuades us to use our emotional intelligence as well to talk about issues or to approach issues. The need for emotional intelligence today is even more demanding because, as we all know, we need to cater to the extreme diversity of people that we have in our society today. Because I think more than ever now, there's so many. Even if we don't talk about our Muslim brothers and sisters, we need to start considering people despite their religion, despite their ethnicity, despite sometimes even despite their gender. Everyone wants to be heard these days. Everyone takes it to the internet and they want to be they want to be heard. They want people to know what they're going through. They want people to know what problems they're facing and how they can solve these problems ultimately. I talk about problems that people take to the internet because I think, like I said, that's where people feel they can be heard the most, and some more often than not, it's where people be honest the most. I think, in comparison to when we have conversations with the people we meet in our daily lives. So I think it's important to hear the discourse that happens on the internet every so often. Okay, so the author continues with the definition of moral intelligence, because earlier I said he talks about the need for more emotional intelligence. Later on, throughout the introduction section, he talks about the definition of moral intelligence. Why I highlight the notion of emotional intelligence and moral intelligence is because this book, as I said earlier, is divided into 4 chapters. The first chapter is Akal, named Akal. The second chapter is emotional intelligence. The third is moral intelligence. Okay. So back to the definition of moral intelligence. I like the way that the author particularly said that I'm going to read you the extract. It says, for all intents and purposes, the words should and ought have been taken out of the dictionary completely, meaning the dictionary of this book, because there is no standard of appropriateness other than one's own self. So simply put, many believe and say, I should only do what I feel is appropriate, because I think, again, now more than ever, everyone's labeling what is right and what is wrong. People should do this or people should do that. You shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. I like the way the author, even in the very beginning of the book, that there is no should and there is no ought. Like, nobody should be told what to do, or nobody should be forced to do what they don't want to do, because and I'd like to link that with the absence of force in our own religion, as in the Quran it says clearly in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 256, that la ikraha fid din, I think, that there is no force in religion. So I like that. Okay, so moving with, I think that's about it with the introduction, because I'm going to tell you a bit more about the language of the book later on. So that's all I have to say for the introduction. I'm going to move on with roughly the summary of chapter 1, because that's what I choose to highlight about in the review tonight about this book, because it's really good. But I'm only going to give you a preview of chapter 1, okay? So I'm going to start with how the author begins with his chapter 1, that is entitled Akal. The author began the book with the tale of his teacher asking the author or not he has made wudu prior to beginning his learning session. So I'm going to read you that part because I think it's very beautiful. Before I begin reading, I want you to think about, when authors begin writing their book, they could start it with any way that they want. And as I went through this book, it talks a lot about, it addresses a lot about, acclaimed works of various sheikhs in the past and even in the present. Like, there's a lot of references of other important works in this book, but he chose to begin this book with a story about him, he chose to begin this book with the story of his teacher asking him whether if he has performed wudu or not before learning. And I think it's very symbolic. Okay, so before I explain, I'm going to read you the extract. So, Bismillah, page 27. The chapter is entitled Akal. As I approached the closed door, the silence of the classroom gave me the impression that my teacher might have already begun the lesson. You did it again, I thought to myself. Every time you sleep after Fajr, you wake up late for class. I whispered to myself, not knowing if the teacher had arrived before me or not. Normally, a silent classroom was a clear sign that the teacher had arrived and had begun his lesson. It was amazing how fast we would quiet down the moment our teachers walk in the classroom. This was likely rooted in the Quranic verse, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And for us, our teachers were the closest we could get to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were our link to him. Whatever the reason, the class was pin drop silent as I approached the door. I opened it, and sure enough, all of my classmates were sitting around the sheikh with their legs folded beneath them and their books open in front of them. Students of prophetic traditions observe an amazingly high level of respect while they read the traditions before their teachers. Normally, the students will read before the teacher as the teacher quietly listens closely to the correct enunciation of the Arabic text. Occasionally, the teacher will stop the reader and explain various aspects of the tradition. Sometimes, however, an entire class could go by without the teacher sharing any deeper insights. Slowly closing the door behind me, I kept my gaze to the floor, hoping my tardiness would be excused and overlooked as I found my place and sat down. I quietly opened my book, trying not to bring the slightest attention to my presence. Our desks were very low to the ground, just high enough for our folded legs to fit under them. I breathed a sigh of relief as my classmate continued to read. I knew that if my teacher allowed me to sit down, this was a sign of him excusing my tardiness. For us, mere permission to sit in class was the highest honor. Just as I began to relax, my teacher stopped teaching and, mid sentence, he looked up to me. It seems like you didn't do wudu before you came, he said with a slight tone of amazement. How did I forget to make wudu? I thought to myself. I was so concerned about getting to class on time that I had forgotten. I remained silent, of course. Knowledge is light from one heart to the next. You will never gain knowledge without spiritual purification. Go make wudu, he said in a soft manner, slightly smiling. Okay, the end. So that's the beginning. Like, that's maybe the first two paragraphs of the book. And then the author continues about, it gets really technical after this. So that's like the story part of the storytelling part of the book. Okay, I think it's very. So what I said earlier, I think it's very symbolic because implicitly, the author chooses to emphasize the idea of the notion of knowledge from the perspective of Islam. So we as Muslims, we believe that knowledge is sacred to the point that it needs an explicit form of purification, such as the action of performing wudu, because the action of performing wudu is very tangible, right? Like you can see it. So yeah, I think the author establishes that before you learn, you need to purify yourself, and it shows that knowledge is divine. And I think again, I like to think beyond what is given to me in stories. So I thought about the link to us making wudu for prayer, right? And how in order for us to communicate with Allah, specifically to pray, we must have wudu. And then similarly with wanting Allah to speak to us, namely to read, when we read Quran, we believe that Allah is speaking to us, right? We also must have wudu. So that way it shows that knowledge is clearly divine. Like the author shows it very implicitly. He begins the book with making wudu. So I think that's amazing. Okay, so that's how the author begins to start the book, the story. Throughout this review tonight, I'm going to pick bits and pieces of the book where I feel touched me the most. Okay, so because there's a lot going on in the book. I'm going to tell you about the language of the book. Okay, before I go on with highlighting the bits and pieces. The language, the style of writing of the book, it tends to switch back and forth between the author's personal accounts and commentaries on various famous works. So that could be kitabs or people's articles or studies. And if anyone has ever read academic text before, I think it's important that it's important to have citations, right, backing up the facts that we talk about. And this book does that. It lists all the references that where the facts were taken from. So if you go to the back of the book, there's a selected bibliography. So that's all the listed works that the book cited. Okay, so the part where you just heard me read just now was obviously the author's personal accounts. Okay, and yeah, so there's parts where the author tells a bit about himself, and also commentaries about acclaimed works. Okay, so another section that touched me the most was how the author addresses how we have reduced the degree of our emotional intelligence with the amount of time we spend behind screens. Because as we all know, I think there are many. Sorry, we and even more with the whole issue of coronavirus, we have no choice but to resort to doing our work behind screens, right? And even communicating with people through video calls and yeah, emails and whatnot. So indirectly, it has reduced our emotional intelligence with dealing with people, because when we meet people in real life, we we can see their body language, we can see their facial expressions. Not to say that we can't do that in video calls or behind screen, but I think it's different, right, when you meet people in person and in comparison to when you have to do this. So yeah, for me in particular, I highly value uh, my relationships with people. So I think it touched me the most when the author said that we are implicitly or indirectly reducing our degree of emotional intelligence because we're spending so much time behind our laptop screen and phone screen. Okay, so moving on with the next gem of the book that I found. I like the way that the author I like I love language. I love language in particular. So I like it when the author tells me about the root meaning of words, So with reference to chapter 1 in particular, the title of chapter 1 is akal, right? So he tells me that the root meaning of akal is to tie something up. In Arabic, akal means to tie something up. So so when you bring that meaning to the idea of understanding or grasping something, it means when a person has understood something, he has grasped its meaning. So when you talk about grasping something, it's like to tie something up. Okay, I think I like that. And then as I was reading through the book, it made me think about because, like I said, the book is quite challenging for me because of the new. Really familiar with the areas that were presented in the book, but nevertheless, it really, really intrigued me, and it made me think about the proficiency level of our Holy Quran. Like how authors nowadays, they have to make sure that whatever they're writing, they need to know who they're addressing this book to, and who would be able to understand most from the book. But with our Holy Quran, because it's a miracle, it's anyone with any proficiency level could understand, either the direct meaning or the indirect meaning of the Quran. So I think that's something special that I managed to gather. Yeah, so when I say about when I say about different levels of proficiency can understand our Holy Quran, I refer to, our maybe non-Muslim brothers and sisters who would be interested to read our Quran, and they don't necessarily have the knowledge that we Muslims have, about our religion. But when they read it, sometimes they are touched with the contents of the Quran. I think I think that was something that I managed to think of. Okay, so moving on with the highlights of chapter 1, because I'm going to give you a brief summary of what chapter 1 talks about. Okay, so chapter 1 is about this scholar named Muhasibi. So Muhasibi is a scholar. Sorry, it's um, he's a scholar of Kalam and Hadith. Okay, so chapter 1 talks about his take on akal, or the idea of akal, and his theory of intelligence. So Muhasibi has written a book called Mahiyat al-Akal, and it talks about the different levels of akal, and basically, yeah. Did I mention theory of intelligence? Yes, his take on the theory of intelligence. Because if you if you're aware of the theories of intelligence that the West has presented, there's this famous one given by Gardner. His name is Gardner, and he came up with a theory of intelligence. So this book challenges Gardner's theory of intelligence with Muhasibi's theory of intelligence based on his book Mahiyat al-Akal. Okay, so again, to jump back to talk about who is Muhasibi exactly, his full name is Harith al-Muhasibi. So if you look him up on the internet, it's so interesting because even his name, al-Muhasibi, means self-inspection, or he who examines his conscience. Okay, so like I said, he's a scholar of Kalam and Hadith. He's a really proclaimed Imam during the Abbasid Caliph period, which is also known as the Islamic Golden Age, whose leaders were Caliphs Harun al-Rashid and Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. So he was really famous during that period. Okay, and he also happens to be a student of Imam al-Shafi'i. So we all know who Imam al-Shafi'i is, but we might not know who Harith al-Muhasibi is. Okay, so that was his brief background. He's really, really well known for his spiritual knowledge, and he's an exceptional orator. So he speaks very well. He's known to move the hearts of his audiences to tears from the things that he talked about in his speech and his talks. And I found it really interesting because the author chose to highlight that he is, because he is such a skilled speaker, it's reflected through his book that he wrote called Tawahum, which means imagination. And Tawahum is a book that talks about, it gives a first person account of all that will take place after death, based on the statements of Quran and prophetic narrations, and also based on the author's imagination. So I can't begin to imagine how the fact that he has the skill to move his audiences to tears, and the fact that he wrote this book about the scenery and the visualizations, if you could call it, about our experiences when we die later on. Like when I came across that description, I am really intrigued and I want to look up this book. I think that's another criteria of a book that I like, when, especially non-fiction. I like it when the book addresses other works of other books that applies to the topic that is talked about in the book. So I think, yeah, I want to explore this book now, called Tawahum by Muhasibi. Okay, so to go on with chapter 1, it also gives us a glimpse of the world of students who embark on the journey to study Islam. So some of you may or may not know some people who choose to dedicate their life to learn Islam or study the Deen. They would, they would go on a pilgrimage, maybe to the Middle East to study Islamic studies. So because the author himself embarked on this journey, he actually talks about the breakdown of what students go through when they take up Islamic studies. So if you look, I mean, he actually gives a table of in page 48. If you have the book, you can refer to it. But in page 48, he actually gives like a breakdown of like the courses. Can you see? Sorry, the courses that Islamic students go through if they, go on this pilgrimage to study Islam. So, yeah, it gives you a brief insight on what the students learn about. So it says here, Arabic vocabulary. The students would have to study Arabic vocabulary, which is lugha, Arabic morphology, which is saraf, Arabic grammar, which is nahu, Arabic rhetoric, which is balagha, Arabic prosody, which is arud, Arabic literature is adab, linguistic theory, which is wada, and Persian language, Farsi. And then the students would have to go on to studying critical thinking, that is logic, or mantik, and then dialectics. Dialectics. So, as someone who is, I don't know much about students who go on to study Islamic studies, but I like the fact that the author gives a brief glimpse of what students go through if they choose to study about Islamic studies. So yeah, that's that. And then later on, as the chapter comes close to the end, it continues with the elaborations on the notion of logic and rationality, and where it actually stands in the Islamic literature landscape. Okay, because even though it talks about the art of thinking from the perspective of Islam, it also addresses the works of Aristotle and Descartes, if you are familiar with the philosophers of the West. So those people have really, given a really detailed account of intelligence and the notion of logic or the notion of rationality. So I like that it talks about these notions from the perspective of Islam. Okay, and then towards the end, the author elaborates on the idea of logically flawed statements. So I think it hit me the most because today there's so many people who are quick to jump to their judgments, like they give arguments that they claim to be logic, but it's actually flawed. Yeah, so I can't think of an example to give you right now, but I'm going to give you the example that was given in the book. So it says here in page 51, it says, Shaitan from the Quranic, it was the first to use flawed logic. Upon the creation of Adam, we are taught that Shaitan refused to bow down before him. When questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Shaitan presented arguably the first logically flawed statement. So what Shaitan says is, I am better than him. You created me of fire, while you created him, or Adam alayhi salam, of mud. So if you think about it, it says here, okay, I'll go on. It says here, he made two false assumptions. That is Shaitan. First, Shaitan made an unfounded assumption that fire is better than clay, which is true if you think about it. And then secondly, he assumed that one's rank or closeness to Allah Ta'ala is based on factors outside of their actions. Because we as Muslims, we know that God evaluates us based on our iman or taqwa, right? So yeah, to talk about logically flawed statements, I think it relates to a lot of the issues that we are presented with online today, because when we find people debating online, they would present us with logical statements, but if we don't analyze their arguments carefully, we will fail to see that their logical statements is actually flawed. So in a way, it kind of mirrors the argument that Shaitan presented to Allah. So yeah, I think that was another eye opener for me. Mm, okay, so right towards the end of the chapter, um, the author ends with the idea of rationality and how we need to have a good rationale thinking skill to be able to, make sense of the arguments that are presented. And the author goes on to highlight that uh, he goes on to highlight a book called Socratic Logic, written by Peter Kreeft, and he says that logic is an aid and an ally to faith. So he explains that while faith can go beyond logic, it must never contradict it. Yeah, so I think that relates with a lot of the issues that we as contemporary Muslims are faced with today. Yeah, and then the chapter ends and it begins with emotional intelligence, which is chapter 2. So in order for you to know more about the book, you should give yourself a chance to read this, because it's very intricate, it's very detailed, but nevertheless it's very, very valuable, the information that the author tries to deliver. So yeah, I think maybe we could see what our audience have decided to say about the review tonight, or whether if they have any questions.
All
Sophia?
right, all
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
I hope
I
I
first, mm,
I hope I gave a good a good account of the book.
I personally very excited for this book review tonight because
Okay.
uh, I heard a lot of good things about this book. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of course, I want to know like an overview of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I check on our social media on Instagram and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
The viewers are very interactive. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, thank you for joining us. I thought of doing this like once a month. What do you think if we do like chapter by chapter of this book? Because it is really a good topic and a good book.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, I mean, it coincides with what I just did just now, because I specifically chose to highlight only the contents of chapter 1. So if
Yes.
you wish to listen to more about the review of, the subsequent chapters, then inshallah maybe we can look into that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you explain it beautifully, inshallah. Okay. So I think, yeah, you can drop your question on the comment section. Inshallah, I will read them. And inshallah, Sister Najiba will answer it for you. Can we go to the first question?
Yeah, sure.
All right. First question. What do you think in terms of the finishing quality of the book? Good size, good paper, good materials?
Oh, the physicalness of the book.
Mm,
Okay. For someone who is quite particular, this is weird, but for someone who's quite particular with the paper of the
yes.
pages of her book,
As a book
I
reader.
yes, um, I love this book because number one, okay, I'm going to tell you the weird things that I like about my book. I like it when my book is matte finishing.
Okay.
I prefer matte finishing books rather than glossy. Okay,
Okay.
so yes, matte cover bonus.
Okay.
Number two, the pages of the book is normal paper. Normal paper, like, just basic paper. those like expensive paper or you know and there's no illustrations in the book, just tables maybe. No illustrations, no, it's just, you know, simply black and white. So yeah, I like normal paper, normal books that have normal paper in comparison to expensive, you know, those glossy or thicker paper.
Yes.
So that's the physical, in terms of the physicalness of the book. In terms of the thickness, like I showed you before, it's like this thick. Yeah.
Mm.
Not very thick. It's very handy. So I like to bring books on the go. Whenever I go out, I like to always have a reading book in my bag, you know, just in case I get bored or something. So this is perfect for that. Yeah, I think because the book talks about such an important issue, but also manages to, you know, contain everything in like this size of a book is really, really good. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, if I may add to your point,
Mm-hmm.
I love the smell of the books. I mean,
I didn't know whether to say that or not because it's so weird.
I think like people who love to read know how that feeling, you know, you love the smell of the book. I mean, from the paper, the smell, I love it. I have the book with me.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. You were going through the pages while I was reading?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And here in Tertib Publishing, for those of you who you know don't have the idea about it, this book was published in US, and we try our best in Tertib Publishing to publish it as similar as to the one published in US. I mean, in terms of the paper quality and the book cover and the content, we make sure to publish it as similar as the one in US. It even wrapped in plastic. Right, Najiba, you receive it in a plastic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you know, you guys imitated the printing
Yeah.
as close to the one that is printed in the US. That's amazing.
We try our best because yeah, it's a good book, right? One of the best books.
It is.
Yes, I love the smell, guys. If you want to smell it too, you have to buy the book. All
Okay.
right. Okay.
Okay.
Moving on to the
Any
next question.
okay.
Okay. One of the comment, she said that must need a big brain to digest the art of thinking.
Yes, I think I kept highlighting the art of thinking. Like, what is the art of thinking, you know? Because if you think about it, you know, you come across people who, if you listen to their argument or if you listen to their statement, you can
Mm,
tell if someone gave it a good thought before presenting you the argument. So, yeah, I think the art of thinking is about being able to consider how your listener might
mm,
perceive what you're delivering,
yeah.
if I make any sense. Because yeah, if more often than not, when you want to talk about something, you remain stuck within your own way of thinking. You never really think about, oh, if I say this, what would this person feel if
Mm,
I, you know, if I say something, if I'm
yeah.
making any sense. Do you
Yeah.
understand? I can't think of an example. Okay, maybe you could highlight the latest issue that occurred in America recently about the, you know, the value of Black lives.
Mm,
You know, how we should see everyone as equal despite the color
yeah.
of your skin.
Yes.
If you talk about something and you don't address if you talk about, I don't know, maybe the privileges that someone has without having to think about their skin color, it wouldn't apply to someone who was, you know, colored or in terms of, you know, their race is Black, because they might have never had or they might have never experienced that privilege. So I hope I gave a good example. You have to think when you have the art of thinking. you think about what the other people might feel if you say something.
Yes,
Mm.
exactly. And
Because
mm,
I think the book is, that's why I kept saying that the book is very detailed and very intricate, to the point that I think um, you need a certain knowledge or a certain skill to be able to elaborate something as heavy as the art of thinking.
okay.
Well,
And I feel that somehow the art of thinking skills are we as a human being overlook. I mean, to add to our life, you know, the art of thinking. I mean, it's a good value. I mean, good skills for us to learn and to have knowledge on it, right?
yeah, definitely.
Mm,
And um, sorry, I might have not focused before, but um, the author keeps on highlighting how we should consider our emotional intelligence into our IQ.
mm,
So when we think about thinking, we might the more familiar explanation of thinking might be, oh, to use our IQ to think,
mm,
right?
mm.
But the author encourages us to apply our emotional intelligence as well, because, like I said, we need to start considering what the other person might feel.
Being
Mm.
empathy, right?
Yes, having empathy and
Mm,
putting ourselves into the shoes of the people who we talk with.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
So, yeah, that's really important. And it, surprisingly enough, it that's what our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam does, because
Yes, yes,
right.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Because in his da'wah, he doesn't just use his IQ. He thinks about, he applies the emotional intelligence to his arguments and his um, the message, to deliver his message. So
Yes,
yeah.
very true. MashaAllah. Okay, moving on to the next question. All right.
Okay. So
Okay. Please share how you manage to be emotionally intelligent.
what? Sorry, I was taken aback by that question. Where does it reveal that I have emotional intelligence? Okay, inshallah. Bismillah.
Mm. I mean, just from your perspective and opinions,
Okay,
from your experience.
can you repeat that question one more time in case I might have misheard it?
Please share how you manage to be emotionally intelligent.
Okay. Okay, before I begin,
Mm,
I'd like to share my insight on
mm,
what I suddenly thought about as I grew up. So I think uh, through, I mean, as I was growing up, I noticed that not everyone has the emotional capacity to
okay.
consider what the other person might be feeling.
Mm,
So everything that I talked about just before, you know how I talk about, before you speak, you need to consider what the other person might be feeling. Even though that's easier said than done, you need to understand that not everyone has the capacity to have that. So I'm going to give you an example. Maybe um, let's say, okay, let's talk about school bags. Okay,
mm,
so when we go to school, some people might have a bigger bag to put more books in, or
mm,
some people might have a smaller bag and they
mm.
can't put as that much books in, right? This is a terrible example, but I'm gonna go on.
All right. Go on.
So the idea of a bigger bag and a smaller bag, right? So that's I want to give you a parallel of that with the capacity of our emotional intelligence, because some people, they only have that size of capacity to understand. They need to consider other people's
Mm,
feelings.
yeah.
Okay,
Mm.
so yeah, do you understand where I'm going with this?
Yeah. That's a
Okay,
great analogy. Yes, go on.
okay, thank
Mm,
you. Um, so because of that, we can't blame other people for having a smaller bag. We can't
mm.
like go to, why do you have a smaller bag? You need to have a bigger bag so that you can put
Yeah.
more books in. We can't blame people because
Yeah.
of that. Okay, so to link back to emotional intelligence, how I have emotional intelligence, um, I think for those who have bigger bags, we need to be the one who I don't know how to say that, maybe step down, or maybe
Understand?
to understand, to empathize, like you said
Yes.
earlier,
Mm,
to empathize other people who have smaller bags, and
I
like,
agree.
yes, through our discussions with them,
Mm,
we need to maybe um, I'm not saying to like force them to open their eyes, but rather to encourage them to open their eyes, to tell them that, okay, there are some people who are born with, you know, the ability to feel more for others, or there are some people who just have less ability to do that. So, because of that, I don't think I can give you one answer to that question, because if I tell you how I have emotional intelligence, I don't think it's fair for those who have lesser emotional intelligence, if you get what I mean, because they might not be able to relate.
mm,
They might, they might not be able to see
mm,
that they need to feel more for others. Um, yeah. um, I think it's just about, okay, for me,
mm,
I think it's about putting others first. As simple as it sounds, it's about putting other people first, and just if you have someone that you care about, your friend or your family, you would obviously want the best for them, right?
yes.
And I think that's the best example that I can give you on how I have emotional intelligence, because when you have a high emotional intelligence, you always want the best for other people, and you will somehow put yourself second. But then again, like I said, I would also like to emphasize that you can't blame someone for having a smaller bag or lesser emotional intelligence, because that's what makes us us, you know? If
Mm,
yeah, if everyone's the same in the world, then it's no fun.
yes, true. Oh my God, I love this conversation.
Thank
I
you.
love this. I want to hear more about it. But yeah, unfortunately,
Mm.
Instagram only have 1 hour
Oh,
time limit. I
okay.
want to hear more. Inshallah, we'll do a series of this. Inshallah, inshallah. So, Najiba, last word from you. Inshallah.
I swear, please buy this book, because I think I gave a terrible review on it.
No, you did great. You did great.
Okay.
Seriously.
But I feel as though I haven't done this book enough justice, to be honest with you. It's really amazing. And even before reading, I made sure to check up this author. I went to his Instagram. I stalked him.
Mm, mm,
I haven't managed to listen to enough talks that was given by him, but
mm,
I did listen to one one insight of his about students who have just finished studying, and how they might be stuck in where they want to go, which very much to me in the minute. But yeah, listening to his thoughts on things is very contemporary. I think it applies really well to you know, the issues of maybe us youths, or us modern Muslims, if we'd like to call it. Yeah, I think he gives a very good explanation on issues that we really need to focus on today. And I think it starts with ourselves, because you know, for those whose hearts have been moved by Allah to read books like this, we need to become the social agents of change, inshallah. So
inshallah. Inshallah.
yeah.
All right, guys. Inshallah, that's all for today's session. Thank you so much, Sister Najiba, for sharing the wonderful, yeah, insights from the book With the Heart in Mind by Sheikh Mikael Smith. Thank you so much. And yes, I think that's it. Don't forget, tomorrow we have another session with Sister Aisha. She'll be reviewing a book on the beneficial means to a happy life by Sheikh Mutasim Al Hamidi. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow on 11 a.m. on Instagram and on Facebook as well, inshallah. I think that's all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Everyone, thank you for watching.